Sure, sure. Um, whoops, whoops, wrong way. Here's my topic: MLK and the first principle. MLK and the first principle. It's a response to this push for collectivism that we're getting from national UU officials. I want to read from Stride Toward Freedom, MLK's first book, 1958. It's about the Montgomery bus boycott and his own theological perspective and his motive for choosing nonviolence. I studied philosophy and theology at Boston University under Edgar S. Brightman and L. Harold DeWolf. It was mainly under these teachers that I studied personalistic philosophy. That's a technical term. There's a philosophy called personalism that he learned at Boston University and that he embraced. The theory that the clue to the meaning of ultimate reality is found in personhood. This personal idealism remains today my basic philosophical position. Personalism's insistence that only personhood is ultimately real strengthened me in two convictions. It gave me a philosophical grounding for the idea of a personal God, and more relevant to us today, it gave me a philosophical basis for the dignity and worth of all human personality. And when he speaks of personality, he's not talking about whether someone is cheerful or bubbly. He's talking about personhood. Personhood. A historian of personalism, that's the name of this religion, or this, excuse me, of this philosophy, this philosophical stance, Thomas Buford said, personalism is a philosophy that considers personhood the supreme value and the key to measuring reality. The person is the key in the search for self-knowledge, for correct insight into reality, and for the place of persons in reality. For adherents of personalisms, persons are independently existing individuals of roughly the sort that Aristotle calls substances. Aristotle and later the scholastic philosophers of the Middle Ages said everything consists of a substance and accidents. The substance was the essence. What it really was, the accidents were incidentals. A chair had a substance of chairness that we could recognize, and it had accidents. It could be upholstered or not, made of this kind of wood or that, those sort of things. To personalists, the substance of a human is this personhood characterized by consciousness, free will, and an array of cognitive capacities like self-consciousness, intersubjectivity, and insight into moral truth. Moral truth. Personalists see the human agency as operating in the domain of objective and rationally knowable facts, including moral facts. As King said at the end of his letter from Birmingham jail after citing Augustine and Thomas Aquinas, the latter being a scholastic philosopher, King said, any law that uplifts human personality, and when King said personality, he meant personhood. Any law that uplifts human personality is just. Any law that degrades human personality is unjust. The heart of personhood for adherents to this philosophy is the capacity to align oneself with moral reality freely and on the basis of one's own insight and understanding. Personalists see people not in terms of our qualitative uniqueness, not in terms of incidentals like race or gender expression or sexual orientation, but in terms of our common personhood. This is what King meant by the beloved community. It was a community brought about by people recognizing each other's personhood. It's a it's a resounding endorsement of our first principle, from which many ministers have said, really, the second, third, fourth, fifth, and sixth principles follow. You can deduce those from the first. King, whose anti-racism efforts are the only efforts we've seen to succeed in our lifetime, his whole personal philosophy was centered on our first principle, and implicitly the other principles as well. When the national UU officials talk about beloved community, that's a perversion of what King meant. When King said beloved community, oh, they genuflect to King and say they're doing homage to him. They're not. They're perverting his idea of beloved community. His idea of beloved community was based on that we're all fundamentally human and recognize that in each other. So I'll now shut up and end the recording. If you're at all